Once again, the real-life story behind this one is kind of well known. Two convicts manage to slip out of Alcatraz, slip into the cold waters surrounding the island, and finally slip into the realm of unsolved mystery. Did the two young men from Oklahoma drown? Did they manage to reach land? Were they picked up by accomplices in a boat? Doesn't matter. They did manage to never be caught again, never to walk the corridors of a prison again. I'm back to the newspapers on this one, though. As I looked for a juicy, interesting slant to an otherwise dull, already told prison escape story, I found that the story had been told pretty dramatically by an ex-con from Alcatraz, a man named P.F. Reed. There's not a lot out there in the internet world about this P.F. Reed guy. The National Archives of San Francisco have him listed as Reed Patrick Pet Forrest, Register 181 of the Alcatraz Former Inmates List. P.F. Reed was somehow connected to a newspaper reporter in late October of 1938, just 2 weeks after his early release from Alcatraz, after having served several years for counterfeiting. In the reporting, there is no mention of a professional writer or journalist helping Mr. Reed with his story. He is bylined exclusively. This story, serialized under the title Murder at Alcatraz, was basically Mr. Reed's telling of several inside events on the Rock during his short stay there. Day 1 of the series begins with a below-the-fold front page header that takes the reader to a page 4 story. Day 2, the story continues again on page 4 without a front page teaser. Day 3, the story moves back to page 6 and tells the story I've dramatized in Windows. That story continues on day 4, again on page 6. Day 5 begins with the prescient banner headline, Thousands of Jews Jailed in Nazi Night Raids. From that story, quote, marked for speedy deportation, more than 3,000 Jews were rounded up in pre-dawn raids in major cities as police suddenly opened a smashing campaign against Jews with allegedly faulty passports. The anti-Jewish drive, which spread terror through the ghettos and jammed police stations with bewildered men and weeping women and children, was described as a measure of self-protection. Berlin's nocturnal roundup was believed to be connected with the government decree in October 8th, requiring Jews to surrender their passports within a fortnight. The arrests were carried out in a rapid and dramatic fashion, beginning in the chill morning at 5 o'clock. Directed by passport control officers, police cars swept through the ghetto, bottling up all entrances to streets in the district and launching a house-to-house search. Heads of families were aroused from beds and peremptorily ordered to dress. Loaded into trucks, they were taken to police stations by the score. End quote. Reed's Alcatraz story has now been pushed down to page 18. The last installment, the 6th, is deep within the October 29th edition of the Washington Times, with the banner of 2 girls attacked by maniac on D.C. streets, with maniac being more clearly described as suspected sex maniac or drug fiend in the photo caption and the article itself. Funny how history rhymes. Pope improved back in the Vatican. 82-year-old Pius XI, quote, still weak but considerably improved in health. And Democrats charge fraud in 2 states, reporting on, quote, fraudulent registration and illegal use of money, wholesale illegal registrations, and raising of slush funds. 27 persons were registered from a dilapidated, unused house. Perhaps the most fun news on October 29, 1938, came under the headline of Drugged Mate Looted His Pants, which tells the story of a woman putting drugs in her husband's coffee in order to steal $95 from his pants while he's in a stupor. The couple were in the process of a divorce instigated by the man. And our story, concluding on page 16 of this edition with our Mr. Reed saying of Al Capone, quote, you see, he's still living back in the 20s, and in his own mind he's still the big shot, and he thinks the whole world is watching him, and he figures he can't show any weakness at all. He doesn't know he's through, and has been for years. End quote. I'll note that we all remember Al Capone, Scarface, recently praised by a presidential candidate, while I'd wager that most of us have never heard of Mr. P.F. Reed before finding this story. Once again, I'm kind of highlighting that not much has changed in the past 100 years of informing the public about events going on in the world around them. There's plenty of political scandal, sex scandal, societal scandal to go around, all patronized by sales of detergents, bedroom suites, personal jewelry, men and women's clothing, snake oil disguised as little liver pills. The funny pages were not all that funny. A lot of the strips were serialized, just like the Alcatraz story. Give just enough for the reader to come back again for more. Sounds like the subscribe part of today's internet content creation to me. It just seems that we're getting nowhere. 3 steps back, 2 forward, 5 steps back, 1 forward, election fraud, invasion of sovereign countries, deportation of people you don't like for whatever reason you want to dish up, rich people getting richer. I didn't mention the story about the little girl who just gets by on $3,000 allowance a month, which is a whopping $67,000 in today's money. Poor people getting by just barely. Scandal in government hallways, inflation, recession, poverty, inequality. Not much talk about climate change, but then again, I'm sure there was talk about the weather. So, we here in the last year of the first quarter of the 21st century shouldn't despair. This too will pass. Look to the past. He who ignores history is certainly doomed to repeat it. But I wonder if ignoring history is really a prerequisite for that repetition. It's certainly beginning to look more like nature rather than nurture. More a delicate combination of the two. Thanks for listening. One more episode in this short series of commentary videos. Check out the description for links to transcripts to the original podcast episode on You're Listening to Radio Revel, the Keyhole Witness series, and to the Library of Congress newspaper archive, just to get a feel for those good old days that are reflected in the ambiguous promise of again. Don't forget to
listen, like, subscribe, and share.
Cheers.